Hi, I'm Dr. L. Carol Scott, a trauma-informed developmental psychologist who brings you to your SAS, your self-aware success strategies that are your birthright from the first 7 years of your life. This video is about empathy, about building empathy, either in yourself or in a child for whom you have some kind of responsibility as a parent or caregiver. If you've been wondering, how do you teach empathy? This video is for you. Now, the truth is, you can't really teach empathy in the classic sense of breaking it down to a series of skills and bits of knowledge that you can transmit somehow through practice and reading and conversation. Empathy is actually a natural strategy for all of us to use in our interpersonal relationships for getting along well with people. And it emerges also naturally, starting at birth, all the way until about age 6, 7, when it finally stops developing its foundation. So empathy is the result of good early years development from birth to 7, if the child is supported by adults who know how to foster that emerging empathy. So here are 5 steps, if you will, showing how the child naturally emerges into empathy. And then after I explain those 5 natural steps, we can talk about how to build those steps into a life that seems to be lacking empathy. So if a child, you or someone else, didn't really develop this empathetic response from birth to 7, at the end of the video, there'll be some development do-overs for those of us who need to build empathy after we're 7. For the very young child, the 5 steps to an emerging empathy actually begin right away in the young infant. When infants are born, they do not have an understanding that they are a separate being. For them, the state, pre-birth state of being within the body of another human being doesn't really feel like it's changed. So the newborn infant still has this sense of parent me, adult me and another person as one. And they don't really identify that they're a separate physical being for a little while, several months. And then they do. And that recognition of a separate physical body is born out of the repeated pattern of needing something and having someone come to take care of that need. I need food. I am hungry. I'm the baby and I need food. And somebody comes and feeds me. I am cold and so I am crying and somebody comes and bundles me up. I'm alone and I'm lonely and I'm crying and somebody comes and picks me up and holds me and talks with me. That repeated pattern of I need something, someone comes to relieve the need, eventually repatterns the baby's awareness of the world to understand there's an other who comes. There's the me who needs something, and there is an other who comes and takes care of it. And so that first step, knowing that physically I'm a separate being from the people who care for me, is a requirement. In order to be empathetic, I have to know that they're not me, that they're separate from me. So there's step number 1. Then the toddler begins to realize that there are emotional differences as well as physical differences. So while the infant may recognize, I've got a body, you've got a body, we're not the same person, they still may feel that you feel everything they feel as the adult. So you believed, you not just believed, but you just knew it, that every emotion you had as a toddler was felt by everyone around you. And if you've ever been in a group of toddlers, this could explain to you why their behavior and their emotion is so contagious. Because if one of them starts to get goofy and hysterical, fall out laughing, then pretty soon they'll all be joining. And if one of them gets afraid and starts crying, then pretty soon they'll all be joining that. So emotion has no separation boundary. Just like the physical body had no separation boundary for the infant, for the toddler, there's no emotional body that is separate. And so they assume that other people feel like them, and they assume that they feel like other people do. And this begins to change during that phase, that toddler phase, when the child is first up and walking and starting to express themselves verbally. And what happens is they begin to understand, they begin to see a pattern that other people have emotions that they're not having. They start to identify a containered, if you will, emotional life, a contained emotional life of their own, just like a contained body is separate. They have a skin all of a sudden around their emotional body, as well as a physical skin around their organs and a lot of water. During this toddler period, the transition in behavior that you see is some evidence that the toddler understands somebody else has a different emotion than they do. And usually, this first manifests as another child being upset, crying, and the child who has emerging empathy, instead of starting to cry along with them, which indicates no empathy, I'm just joining you, I'm just having your feeling with you because I don't have your feelings. Instead, what happens is they don't share the emotion, they don't start crying, and they go over and pat the little one on the shoulder and say, it'll be okay, that's okay, don't cry, you're going to be okay. They show understanding that that child is having an emotional state that's uncomfortable and difficult, and that they're not having it at the same time. They are in a stable, regulated place emotionally, and so they're able to offer an empathetic response for a difficult emotion. Because although they may not be able to speak about it yet, on some level they understand, oh, that feeling, I've been there, I know what that feels like, but you know what, I don't feel that way right now, so I'm just going to show my support. So there's the second step in the gradually emerging emotional state of empathy, or the strategy of empathy, if you want to think of it that way. That's the way I think of it. Then, as a 3-year-old, the child starts to recognize that same separation, physical, emotional, now is about energy, motivation. What's the impulse of the moment? This is when children begin the process of learning self-control for their behavior. You know, toddlers, they don't have any brakes on anything. They don't have self-control, and that's not what they're about. But 3-year-olds, they're into learning how to control themselves. They'd like to learn how to not necessarily knee-jerk react to the world all the time. So at 3, children are discovering that people want things differently from what they want, that their motivation for engaging with the world, their inspiration from the world, it's different. So the energetic body, if you will, that's sort of what it is that gets me moving, that wanting, desiring, longing part of me that is my engine that drives me forward. At the age of around 3, children start to notice that they have a separate motivation, a separate impulse, a separate energy for life than other people do. And they start to recognize that everybody wants what they want. And then by 4 and 5, the next step, the 4th step, is the understanding finally that there's a cognitive difference. There's an intellectual understanding of the world that is different. There are different memories. There are different thoughts. And so by now, by the age of, let's say, probably by 5, the child knows I have a separate body, I have a separate emotional life, I have a separate energetic life, a separate motivated life, and I have a separate intellectual or mind life, life of mind. What goes on inside my brain is not the same as what goes on inside of yours. And then finally, at 6 and 7, with the birth of logic, now, are you hearing me? Logic is finally born in a child at 6 or 7 years of age, so please don't expect anything resembling logic in the younger child. And the beginning of it is about cause and effect, understanding that when you do this, this happens. And so children of this age are starting to learn how to see that they have an impact on other people, that they leave a wake. They're a little boat on the lake of life, and they leave a wake behind them that disrupts other people sometimes. And so the final 5th step in the evolution of empathy is this understanding of my impact on other people. So I learned that I have a separate body, I'm a separate physical person, I have a separate emotional life, I have a separate energetic life, I have a separate mental life, and what I do makes a difference to other people. Once I have all that in place by age 7, I have empathy. You can't teach it to me. I have just gradually developed it through my interactions with other people to find all those things out. And so I can say to myself, self, This is how you are. This is how you think and feel and see the world. And Jeremy over there and Lucinda over there and Kwame over there, they don't see it your way. They don't feel it your way. They don't want what you want. They're different. Isn't that interesting? And as long as we can maintain that point of view that it's interesting, that it's not wrong to be different from me, but it's just different, then we have empathy. And so as adults, or even as older children, what are the development do-overs if all of those initial steps somehow got missed, or even a couple of them did? We're 10 years old or 15 years old or 45 years old, and we still don't understand that other people have different emotions than we do. Or we think that there's something wrong with them if they're not motivated by the same things we're motivated by. And we think they're weird or strange or wrong in some way if they don't think about the world the way that we think about it. And in fact, there's an awful lot of interpersonal conflict around these exact same things. So what do we do as development do-overs to reclaim these pieces of empathy? It begins with boundary work. Boundaries are not just when you say, no, I don't want you to do that. Boundaries are the edges of your identity. And it's time to start taking a look at, how do I feel right now? And how do the people around me feel? And getting comfortable with the fact that it's different. That everybody in the room, when there are 5 people or 500 people, is having a different emotional response, a different understanding of the activity in the room, a different kind of energetic response to it, a different interest and involvement in it. And that all of that is okay. For empathy, that's where the development do-overs begin. And it's tricky work because it's not concrete. It's metaphorical. It's abstract to talk about having boundaries around who you are, having a container for who you are. So I have a number of activities that I do that strengthen those boundary awareness places, that help you discover and feel comfortable with being who you are, different from other people, being the unique offering gift to the world that you are. If you'd like a sample of some of those development do-overs, then I suggest you join one of my monthly Sassy Sunday salons, or hit me up for a coaching session. There are links below for you to do both of those things, and please feel free to take a look at my website and listen to some of my podcasts. That's all for now on the subject of empathy, and I hope that it gave you some terrific ideas for supporting yourself in empathy and for supporting the children in your life in developing their own pathway to empathy. So find your edges, find your boundaries, and let's all get out there and be a lot more sassy.